Welcome to the Writer Reads Flash Fiction. This is day 14 from another 365 days of flash fiction, and this one's titled A Badger's Blend. If you live in the hollow by the side of the hill, beware of the badgers and their dodgy still, Marcus said, giving the sing-song rhyme Samila had heard ever since arriving at Badger's Bend. Badger's Bend, he'd asked, laughter in his eyes, should be better called Badger's Bender, and he wouldn't be drawn on what he meant. Samila found out soon enough. The badgers lived in a cottage up the road, and they brewed their liquor strong. Samila had thought them human at first, and far enough away that she'd been excited to see one of their shy namesakes watching her from the river bank as she bathed. Right up until he'd shifted to human form and run off with her clothes. "Hey!" she'd shouted, but he'd been laughing fit to bust, and she knew she wasn't going to need a cup of sugar to go and introduce herself. She didn't remember much of the first time she went to visit. She'd been able to smell whatever they were cooking up, so she'd cooked up a cake to complement it. The first sip had hit her like a freighter falling out of orbit, and she'd suggested they try and make their brew more seductive, before politely finishing the glass. She'd woken up in her own bed, fully dressed, with a pounding headache, and she'd vowed never to return. A week later, the brothers had rolled up on her doorstep with a bottle, an empty cup for sugar, and one wife and 3 kits in tow. She'd brought a casserole. Samila had taken a whiff of the brew and baked a slightly different version of her cake. It had still been more a barroom brawl than a seduction, and she'd still woken up in her own bed and fully clothed. She'd been a lot more careful about swimming in the creek, too, but she'd visited to help with the kits and to ask for help in how to get the thennaberries to grow. Thennaberries also made a good brew, closer to seduction than she would have liked, especially when preserved with honey, which only gave her more ideas for off-world exports. She bought peaches off Marcus and tried to preserve them, and the older brother left the sugar cup behind when he took half. "Hey!" It seemed to be a common word between them. 3 months of exchanging ideas, and he came one night, alone, with a bottle of something that blended thenna, peaches, and the local honey. "Seduction, right?" he said, handing her the bouquet of flowers he held in one hand, and Samila laughed and looked past him for the rest. He blushed. "They're busy. I hope I'll do." The look on his face made more than Samila's face heat. "Let's see how close you came this time," she said, turning back to the kitchen. She'd made enough for 8, but there was room in the freezer, and the brothers' blend was everything he'd promised. "Seduction in a bottle," Samila murmured, catching sight of the bottle on her bedside table in the morning. It glistened in the dawnlight, and she smiled. This time she had not woken up alone. And as for clothes... Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this reading, please hit like. If you want to see more, please hit subscribe. And I'll check you later. Take care out there.